First things first, this is a retrospective review of Lies of P. Now, I have finished the game and let it sit with me as well as marinate for a while for the initial hype to die down, and I can, at least in my opinion, really look back at the game with realistic eyes. And now I did do a WTF IS preview of this game, so I do highly recommend you watch that before this one to kind of get an idea of what we're talking about in this video, as well. There aren't any spoilers in that one, whereas this one will get into a bit of spoiler territory, so if you don't want any part of that, don't watch this one, just watch that one instead. Now, you have been warned, my broski. In any case, Lies of P. Bro, what the fuck? The game starts off regularly like any other Souls-like, with the story confusion and somewhat difficult gameplay loop, with progressing while collecting enough ergo, or the equivalent of souls, to level up your character towards the preferred playstyle. And it seems to be the usual stuff in this game as well, with fighting puppets until you beat, I think it was the third or fourth big boss in the game. After that, the game suddenly shifts in tone quite a bit, and I was genuinely surprised with that change of tone. First off, the mood changes where you start fighting not just puppets but also corpses who are basically zombies, but they have gone ergo crazy in a sense. Now, the city of Krat has been overtaken by the petrification disease, which apparently turns those who have been affected into zombielums. These zombies are slow in general, but they hit quite hard, so you have to change up your tactics to accommodate for this change. Now, you also do fight puppets in the game, but here is where the game actually gets quite interesting, as you end up fighting puppet human hybrids. Awesome, I'll get into that a bit later. Long story short though, the mood shifts after fighting the master of puppets, who is controlling, well, all of the puppets. But after beating him, you realize someone is controlling the master of puppets. And well, it's also classic, there's always a bigger fish in the sea type of progression in the story. The story evolves and starts to make more sense if you compare it to the original confusion that I talked about in the preview. But before all that, it's time to plug the subscribe button. Yes, my broski, if you've enjoyed the video so far, please do click that like button down below, as well as subscribe to the channel. We are on the road to the greatness of the tubes, and I would love to have you on board, as you subscribing to the channel and liking the video would help me out a absolute ton, as equivalent exchange works in general, as we all know. Of course, I give to you mediocre humor at the very best for the vibes of you subscribing and enjoying these videos. Now let's get back to the video. Characters you meet actually explain things in an understandable manner rather than using weird metaphors like in some other games. You also find out some history behind who Sophia is. You know, the girl who helps you level up? Now, she is what is called a listener, a being who is able to bestow power through controlling ergo. She is also apparently the last of her kind, of which everyone else has been turned to trees, unfortunately. Also, it's the golden tree that helps you respec your character, and the gold coins you collect from those trees are the tears of those who have fallen. So you literally respec with golden tears of dead people. Now, bro, it does not get more grim than that, I am afraid. In the second half of the game, you also meet the big bad boss in the game called Simon Manus, an alchemist who is experimenting with ergo as well as the petrification disease to make puppet human hybrids. Now, according to Simon, Victor, who you get to fight later on, is the evolution of the human race, and no wonder, as this bro is quite a tough cookie to beat and is one of the more challenging bosses in the game. And that brings me to the evolution of the difficulty in Lies of P, or I. In the preview video, I talked about how the game isn't all that difficult, at least in the early hours of the game. Unfortunately for the hardcore gamers out there, the difficulty doesn't really pick up until the latter hours, and I mean super latter hours of the game as well. I do have to say, apart from the green swamp monster though, bro, what the actual fuck? You get to a point in the game where you fight this boss, and you're used to this by now already with like 20 hours into the game, and I fully understand that I might get called out for this in the comments down below, and please do if you're listening to this. As to some people, this fight might be a walk in the park, but man, for the casual player, bro, the first phase of the fight is fairly easy, admittedly, as long as you make sure your weapons don't lose all durability, because the green swamp monster's attacks tend to drain your durability. But the second fight, bro, that's just sadistic. You have to fight the same boss again, but this time he has like friggin' triple the amount of health, has more attacks in his arsenal that are also near impossible to time right, to dodge or parry. parry, and in any case, if any of these actually hit you, they just drain like half of your health. There are so many things wrong in this fight could merit their own video, from literally having no space in the arena to fight, to the camera that's definitely not your friend here, and everything else I just mentioned before this. Now, up until this point in the game, fights have been more on the challenging side rather than being unfair, and this is pretty much the only boss fight in the game where I thought to myself, bro, what the actual fuck are the devs thinking here? I know I'm going on a rant here, but bro, what a piece of shit that was. Anyway, everything else in the game is surprisingly amazing. Apart from the boss fight I just mentioned, there aren't really any other really difficult bosses in the game. I mean, they're epic in every sense of the word, don't get me wrong on that one, but in the quote-unquote second half of the game, two-phase boss fights become the normal. And for example, the last level of the game is basically most of the big enemies you've faced so far, but just as regular mobs. It looks super cool and epic as settings go, of course, but it does inevitably feel like it's just fodder on the way to the super freaking epic boss that is the second to last boss fight. Now, the setting for Simon's bodyguard and the cutscene are absolutely amazing. Same goes for Simon himself that you get to fight a bit later on. But the last boss is the only time in the game where I really felt like I had to respect my character, if I'm being completely honest. This is a change of pace when compared to other Souls-like games in terms of difficulty. I didn't find it to be an issue personally, but some people might think that this is not the typical Souls-like way of progression. Now, speaking of progression, the side missions actually affect what happens in the main story, at least in a sense, and that is absolutely awesome. For example, the old granny Antonia is down with the sickness, and as her condition continues to get worse, the butler wants to speak to you in private. Now, depending on if you did an earlier side quest where a random dude wants you to find the remains of his wife and retrieve a ring, and if you agree with the guy that humans can fall in love with puppets, because long story short, his dead wife was actually a puppet all along, he gives you his wedding ring, which you can show to the butler, who in turn confesses his own love for the plagued granny. It's interesting how a decision in a side quest follows through in the main quest as you show remorse for someone else's situation. It makes you wonder about psychological shit that I haven't really wondered in a while, in a game especially, so it's quite cool. The whole quest of Lady Antonia is amazing in all honesty. Now granted, not all side missions in this game are this vast in scope and are mostly just fetch quests. Now as the game progresses, you start to become more human, and if you lie a lot, well, you get white hair, and that's pretty much it, unfortunately. Now the quote-unquote real ending to the game you get from pretty much just lying to literally everyone and really putting your humanity stat through the roof is apparently the best ending in the game. So for the people who haven't really played it so far, you might want to just lie your way through. Now this brings me to the kind of not so great things about this title. Now, as with most games, none are inherently perfect, so there are bound to be negatives to each experience, and it's very subjective as well. And this game is no different, as weapon durability, for example, feels half-baked, if I'm being honest, or more forced, same as the cube you acquire and some other items in the game. The camera also, unfortunately, is against you 9 times out of 10, my broski. And I'm not even joking, the lock-on system is great in its own sense because you get to track the enemy at all times, but because the arenas tend to be on the smaller size, man, the camera suffers a lot at these times. In a game where one hit can literally be the difference between winning and dying, a lot of the times I ended up dying because of the camera just getting stuck somewhere and it literally being impossible to see anything happening on screen. It's a real bummer, especially when most of the battles are epic standoffs and then it turns into this blob of particles on your screen because you backed up against an invisible wall and the camera just doesn't go any further back. Now, did I like the game? Abso-fucking-lutely. Would I recommend this game? Abso-fucking-lutely. Is it better than Bloodborne though? That's the real question. The answer is no. I'll be very honest with that one. But yeah, it's a good game. It's a great game in its own sense. Now, should you play this game? Or how the fuck should I know? I was only here to tell you my experience with the game. You can do whatever the fuck you want. And that pretty much wraps it up for this video yet again for this week. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did, smash that like button down below. Also, subscribe to the channel, of course. We are on the greatness to the greatness. We are on the road to the greatness of the tubes. And I would love to have you on board for the ride. Anyway, drop a comment down below on whether you like this game in general, whether this is at least in your top 3 all-time Souls-like games or not. And if it's not, tell me which 3 games are, because I'm genuinely interested to know, and start a conversazione down below-y. Oh, not below-y. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day wherever you're from, whichever time of day you watch this at. I'll catch you guys in the next upload. Hasta pronto.